Okay, let's talk about Qui-Gon, because this right here is a big issue. As has been pointed out by others, he could just trade in their existing ship for money and get a smaller ship, or even just use Republic credits to hire someone to transport them to Coruscant. After all, smugglers, traders, and other people probably still do business in the Republic, and they should be happy to get that kind of money. This is a pretty big plot hole, and while I'm loath to just describe a movie as bad because of plot holes, this is a significantly bad one, because him not exploring these other solutions and needing to follow the actual scheme that happens makes up a good chunk of the movie. But hey, let's say for the sake of argument that they don't trust that they wouldn't be betrayed to the Federation and can't pursue that option. We have a bigger issue with Qui-Gon here, and in turn, kind of a problem with the entire prequel trilogy. It is argued that one of the overarching points of the prequels is that there is an imbalance in the Force by the Jedi being in control, what with there being so many light side users and so few dark side users. That in turn, the story is about the fall of the Jedi because of their hubris, their growing inability to use the Force, and their willingness to compromise their morality during this time. This is best exemplified in Qui-Gon during parts of this movie. It's one thing to mind trick bad guys so you can slip past them to serve the greater good, but Qui-Gon is perfectly willing to use his powers to get what he wants. He did it with Boss Nass, and he tried to do it with Watto, basically steal from him to get the parts he needs. He doesn't know anything about Watto. He doesn't know if he's just some guy trying to make a decent life for himself, but he's perfectly happy to steal from him. But hey, even if he knows he's an utter scumbag, why not just find some other scumbag on the streets to steal the money from who isn't immune to mind tricks and exchange the money? In rewatching the movie for the review, I'll say this. It's not unbearable. It's still quotable, still enjoyable depending on what you're looking for, but the effects are still a major issue in a lot of scenes. Jar Jar in particular has a very uncanny valley thing going for his movements when walking alongside the real people. I actually found him much more distracting than the Yoda puppet that everyone seems to hate. I don't. I much prefer it to the CG version used in later cuts of the film. Ironically, I'd actually welcome an update to the effects there. Marvel has shown that you can have characters like Thanos and the Hulk standing alongside real people and seeming fine. So a version with better effects for Jar Jar and the Gungans would be pretty cool, even if I don't like the overall product. The dialogue is still awkward as hell in a lot of spots, not helped by very low-key performances where no one is being told how to act or emote like they should be. Personally, I feel that The Phantom Menace is the weakest of the three prequel films. It does set up a lot of stuff. The Senate, Palpatine's takeover as Chancellor, the titular menace that is a phantom since they don't know exactly what it is, Obi-Wan and Anakin, but the story stakes don't feel as high as they should be. And many people have pointed out that despite all that setup, you could honestly start straight from episode 2 and not really miss anything important. In some ways, it being better to do that, because then you don't have the awkwardness of knowing that Padme and Anakin met when she was a teenager and he wasn't even 10 yet. Hey, wait, why did they elect a teenager as queen? On the subject of the movie itself, like I said, it is a bad film. While I still think Phantom Menace is worse, if only by virtue of the delivery not being as bad as it was there, the poorly handled romance drags things down considerably, especially since in addition to setting up how Anakin becomes Darth Vader, it's supposed to be establishing who Anakin is as a character now to us, since he obviously is not the 9-year-old yelling yippee anymore. And the impression of him is not good, but as a whiny, petulant jerk who doesn't know when to stop hitting on the woman he's supposed to be protecting. Chunks of exposition that would give us a better idea of how things work in this universe are missing, relegated to expanded universe material. The movie is definitely more in love with its effects department than it is in developing the romance. This is the film that really is pushing more of the digital technology that Lucas loved so much. CGI environments everywhere, more poorly integrated CGI characters, and even the clone troopers themselves are all computer generated, probably for ease of using so many of them in large battle scenes. And speaking of battle scenes, yeah, this movie definitely cares more about the flashy action scenes over anything else. There's still stuff I like, still a foundation for a really good movie if some things have been changed, but overall, it's just the middle chapter of the prequels, and for many, it feels like we're just dragging our way to the end. Also, why is this movie called Attack of the Clones? The clones aren't really the ones on the attack. the Jedi attack, but this is pretty much a defensive action, or at least a rescue mission. As for the film, and the prequel trilogy overall, here are some final thoughts. Most of what I have to say about this movie I've said throughout. Anakin's turn to the dark side feels rushed, line delivery is still pretty bad, and it chopped out a lot of good stuff. While there are still plenty of problems with the CGI in this movie, I will say that when it comes to, say, the CGI Yoda, it's actually vastly improved over Attack of the Clones. Part of the problem with these early entirely CG characters is that they only had them move when they were talking, or had very deliberate motions. Even the mocap stuff with Jar Jar was very janky in his movements. As such, when they stopped talking, they just seemed to suddenly freeze in place for a moment. In this movie, Yoda feels more real, as if he was an actual living thing interacting with them. It's not perfect, but it's much better than last time. The technology had finally started catching up with the ambition of the film. And then there's the thing that people are still commenting on, the whole Jedi bringing about their own downfall, their arrogance and hubris and all that. The problem comes down to framing. You can list off the individual plot points that occur to support this argument, but the issue is the movie's presentation of those points does not, in my opinion, support the argument. As an analogy, the romance in Attack of the Clones is not framed as creepy and awkward. It's presented in a straightforward manner of star-crossed lovers. It does not actually recognize the thing that we see from the actors' performances, that this is wrong and uncomfortable. As far as the movie is concerned, Anakin's "I don't like sand, but your skin is smooth and nice" isn't something we're supposed to be creeped out by. And thus, by that token, the Jedi are not framed as arrogant, emotionless fools, but wise guardians of the light. A Jedi Master uses his powers to take things for the sake of expedience, and that's considered normal. A Jedi Master will rig gambling to win in his favor, and Jar Jar grins at that. A Jedi Master will steal from someone to get what he wants through attempted mind control when the individual refuses their payment method. A Jedi Padawan and Master torture and interrogate a suspect in the streets, and none of it is ever called out. No one reacts with shock and horror at this. There's no dark music sting to indicate that they're going too far. A Jedi slaughters children in a fit of rage at the death of his mother, and the movie frames it not as him becoming a villain, but a tragic loss of control that he feels insanely guilty over. He's not a villain in that scene, but a remorseful, weeping object of pity and sympathy for the audience. People wondered why Padme was comforting him after he admitted to slaughtering children. That's because the movie wants you to feel sorrow for him about this, and thus she comforts him out of love. The movie frames it as something to identify with. No one's pulling a Todd here.
You can't keep doing shitty things and then feel bad about yourself like that makes it okay.
The movies don't have a problem with what the Jedi are doing, and that tells the audience there is nothing wrong with what they are doing. People bring up the Jedi kidnapping children to be indoctrinated into their order as further evidence of them having fallen so far, but unfortunately, I have to sing this song again. That's not in the movie. The movie only says they trained little kids, not that they were taken or anything. There's nothing in the film to suggest that their methods of teaching are wrong either. Hell, people bring up how the Jedi are supposed to be shown as out of touch, focusing too much on combat and politics, or how their emotional detachment makes them bad guys. But the movies don't present it that way. And frankly, it's not exactly a strong counter-argument that the thing they explicitly say would be a bad idea, training Anakin despite being too old, ends with him becoming evil and murdering them all when he rejects their way of thinking. Never does Yoda say, "Our fault this is. Should have understood and helped Anakin's feelings, not told him to ignore them." Obi-Wan never reflects on the rigidity of the code and their ways of thinking that led them to miss all the obvious red flags. It's just, only a Sith deals in absolutes. It's not that this opinion or reading of the films is wrong, that the Jedi aren't partly to blame for their own downfall. It's that the movies are bad and don't present it that way. The closest we get is them talking about them discussing in secret how they should overthrow the Chancellor if he refuses to end the war or give up his power. And Yoda rightfully pointing out, hey, this is kind of a dark line of thought we're heading down. However, saying that an attempted coup would be bad is kind of undermined by the fact that the Chancellor is the Dark Lord of the Sith who has been manipulating everything from the start. But despite all that I've said, all that I've complained about, I can't find it in my heart to hate these movies. There are things about them that I hate, but Honestly, it's still Star Wars. I'll rant and rave like any fan, but then Duel of the Fates starts up and I'm suddenly invested. I'll make fun of the goofiest of dialogue and most bizarre performances, but in the end, I'm still gonna enjoy it. Rewatching them, I still see all their problems, and yet there's still something about them that makes me smile, and I suddenly get why so many are still entranced by them even after all these years. And I'm sure that's not gonna change even after another 20 years. And maybe that's the real New Hope. That ultimately we can still talk about these movies, what we hate and love about them, while still coming together to love everything about the franchise overall.